Bruschetta, Bruschetta, Bruschette, Teddy Bruschi, Bruschetta, Bruschetta.
Alright, that's plenty of that. Sorry for that, guys. If you stuck with me this far, thanks. That's enough on how to pronounce bruschetta. Now let's talk about how we make bruschetta. So ignore this guy in the background, and let's get to cooking. So I'm electing for homemade bread with this, and I'm going with Jim Leahy's infamous no-knead recipe. I'm doing a half batch here, starting with my bread flour, instant yeast, salt, and then our water. Again, this is a half batch. I'll attach the recipe down below. Really easy. It's just basically, you don't have to knead it. You throw everything in a bowl, you mix it for a few minutes, it comes together in a kind of sticky, shaggy ball, and then you can let it sit for 12 to 18 hours. I usually just do it the night before, let it sit overnight, and then in the morning my house smells amazing, and I have this cool bread ball. This is after 12 hours exactly. You can see it really puffs up nicely. It's super soft. This is exactly what you want it to look like. So now it's time to shape it. Traditionally, this recipe is for a big round bread loaf. I'm going with a baguette, mainly because I don't have a Dutch oven and because we're making bruschetta, and a big old loaf of bread isn't really what I want. I kind of want a baguette for this, cut it in the shape that I'm looking for. It's going to stick to the bowl a little bit. It's a very sticky dough here. We don't want to add flour, but we're just generously flouring our work surface, and then put a little bit on your hands to get it out. And now you can see it's just super easy. It's very soft, it's very malleable, so I can just shape it into a baguette. It comes together really, really quickly. Then when I have it like this, we're going to let it rest for another 2 hours. So this is a time-consuming recipe, but it's totally worth it. Super easy. It just obviously takes time to really develop that flavor. You don't have to let them rest as long as this, but it really develops the flavor, and it makes it grow and get puffier and bigger. Exhibit A, this is a nice puffy boy, like a big old puffy marshmallow. It really makes it nice and bigger and fluffier. Another optional choice here, I'm going to score my bread. You don't have to, especially because I'm going to cut it later, so it's kind of pointless, but I just like to do it for the look and kind of the texture that it gives to the bread. Totally up to you, but this is ready for the oven. So we're going to throw it in a 400-degree oven that I preheated. This is my pizza stone. I let this heat in the oven, so this one is nice and hot. You don't have to use a pizza stone. Again, the recipe calls for a Dutch oven if you're doing it the traditional way, but you could really bake this on anything. I mean, this pizza stone was 10 bucks at the grocery store, and I've used it for all kinds of things. Here's my setup in the oven. Underneath there is my water bath. I let that sit in there for a while, so the steam is just going throughout the oven. It really adds a nice crispiness to the bread while still keeping it moist in the middle. This little guy only took me about 20-25 minutes. You can use a thermometer to temp it in the middle if you want to. It's really just the eyeball test and just touching it. But it is pretty easy to tell when it's done, especially with the thinner baguette like this. Really doesn't take too long, and you can kind of see that it's, it's getting nice and brown on the outside. But it's still super hot, so it's going to continue to carry over cook and let it rest for about 15-20 minutes, and you'll be good to go. So now for our bruschetta mix, I'm making a sort of vinaigrette, right? I'm going equal parts of balsamic vinegar, olive oil, about a tablespoon of garlic. This is a cup of each, by the way, and I'm doing a ton of cracked black pepper. You see a lot of places where they make bruschetta, they put it on their bread, and they kind of top it with oil and balsamic vinegar. I like to let it marinate a little bit more, so it just makes it a little bit more of a cohesive dish, and some of that juice kind of seeps into the crusty bread and just soaks it up really nicely. I like to do it this way. Do it whichever way you want, but this is just so much easier, and I feel like it develops a lot more flavor. I threw in some salt there. Now I'm just going to whisk it together. You don't have to whisk it too crazy. We're not making an emulsion here. We're just kind of making a broken vinaigrette, if you will. And I put the garlic in here now to kind of mellow out the garlic flavor. If you put it in the bruschetta, it's going to still be pretty harsh, so I like to just let it mellow in the fridge. I like to let it go for at least 20 to 30 minutes in the fridge, but you can let it sit for days as long as you want. And I'm going to put that in a container and let it cool in the fridge. Now back to our mix. Traditionally, you go with, diced onion, diced tomato. I like to do my onions longer and razor thin, so they kind of just sit on the bruschetta toast and don't fall all over the place. Similarly with my tomatoes, these are some cherry tomatoes. You can use any tomatoes you want. Again, you can dice them, you can slice them, you can cut whatever shapes you'd like. I'm just going to quarter these, so again, I don't really like the little tiny pieces of everything that kind of fall off the bruschetta, so that's why I'm going with a larger theme here, and you'll see how it plays into the way that I'm cutting the bread later. But just high quality ingredients. Nice red onion, fresh tomatoes. This isn't traditional, but I'm going with mozzarella just because I'm cheese obsessed. This is one of those logs that's pre-sliced, so I'm just going to quarter this into pieces that are similar size to my tomato. Again, not a traditional ingredient, but I really love cheese, so I'm actually going to throw in a little bit more here, quarter that up, and this is ready for our bowl. And lastly, the basil, right? The store was actually out of the traditional basil, so I found this really cool plant that you just have to, water and give some sunlight, and it gives you fresh basil for a while. I mean, this is some of the best basil I've had in a long time, so I'm just going with a chiffonade, pick off the leaves, kind of roll them up like a little cigar or whatever you like to roll, and then just going super thin with the cut, giving these really nice thin strands of basil. This is the way I like to do it. You can chop it up if you want, but this just doesn't bruise the basil, and I just like that thin ribbon or chiffonade, if you will. A super out of the box ingredient here. I had a leftover avocado, so I figured, hey, why not? I love avocado. It's kind of like bruschetta meets avocado toast. So I'm going to just dice this up. Just be super careful. You can cut through the skin with a knife very easily, so just keep your fingers away from that and just be very careful, especially when you're taking the stem out. But I'm going to put this on half of my bruschetta just to kind of see how it melds with these flavors. So in one bowl, we're going to mix our tomato, onion, mozzarella, and basil. Get these ingredients kind of melded together, and then I'm going to take our vinaigrette, if you will, and just top a few tablespoons over top. Don't go crazy with this. You can always add more, but you can't really take away, so just put a little bit on there, mix it up, and then see if you need to add more. And now for our second batch, I'm going with our tomato, our red onion, our mozzarella, our avocado. Again, this is kind of like bruschetta meets avocado toast. I figured it'll be good. Basil over top, a few more tablespoons of this vinaigrette. I don't let this soak too long, because if you let the vinaigrette soak too long, the tomatoes are going to get mouchade, the onions are going to get super soft, the cheese is going to darken a little bit. So I like to just do it like that and let it sit in the fridge for about a half hour at least, but not too long. Now I'm doing a quality control on our bread, and yes, it is very good. You can see it's got a nice crispy crust on the outside because of that steam bath, but it's still so soft and so spongy in the middle. This is just perfect how we want it. Now traditionally you probably cut this in half first and then do like these long diagonal cuts like I'm doing here, but after you cut it in half. I'm not doing that today. I kind of want these fancier long, one bite that can fit directly in my mouth versus like these wider pieces. I just want a fancy kind of crostini, if you will, like a much fatter crostini. So I just want to, my thinking is to do this a little bit differently, so that the bread is a little bit thicker but much thinner in the other way, if that makes sense. And then I'm just going to top a narrow layer on top, and it should stop me from making a huge mess. So now I'm going to take these pieces of bread and just hit them with some olive oil, salt, and pepper. Just throw them in a super hot oven just for a few minutes. I think I did 400 for about 6 or 7 minutes. Just keep your eye on these. If you've never done it like this, I mean, this is super common. It gives a nice toast to the bread, just to kind of make it kind of a little bit crunchier on the outside. But we're not going to toast it too long to where it becomes like a giant crouton. It's just going to give it a nice toast, but the middle is still nice and soft. So here's what it looks like out of the oven. Doesn't look too much darker. It makes a huge difference in texture. And this trick I absolutely love. I take a fresh garlic clove. I'm just going to brush it right onto the toast. And this really gives it a really nice, intense garlic flavor. If you love garlic, do this. If you're planning a first kiss tonight, don't do this, because it's definitely going to give you some harsh garlic breath. So first date, this may not be the way to go, but if you're a garlic lover, then get to rubbing your toast. I mean, I love the garlic flavor on this. If you're kissing me, you're getting a mouthful of garlic. Deal with it. So I absolutely love this. It's a really cool trick, and it really adds another layer to our bread. And now join me while I've already topped one of our crostinis, if you will, because I forgot to turn on the camera. But yeah, here's where you can get messy, because obviously this isn't the plate or the platter that I'm going to serve it on. So, this baking sheet with the parchment, I'm just going to top it on here so I can make a little bit of mess. But you can see, because it is narrower, it's not as much room to work with, but because these ingredients are larger, it's pretty easy to spoon on there, and I'm really not having that difficult of a time to just kind of top these nicely, because I think Irma from Curb Your Enthusiasm would agree that there's nothing worse than bruschetta falling off your plate. If you've seen it, you've seen it. But you can really cut any kind of shape of bread that you want. You can cut your ingredients in any kind of shape that you want. If you like large ingredients, go for it. If you like a smaller traditional dice, go for it. Just have fun with it. I mean, now that you know the basic ideas of how to assemble these and top these, use whatever you have in your fridge, use whatever flavors you like, and really make it your own. For these bad boys without the avocado, I'm going to do a nice sprinkle of Parmesan cheese over top, just for a nice cheesy garnish, because I love it. And because I'm an animal, I'm going to eat these right away. I just can't help myself. I can't wait. But if you were throwing a party or something later, you can see these bad boys. If you let these sit in the fridge for a while and kind of cool up nicely, the cool topping with the bread is so nicely toasted that it can kind of stand up to cooling in the fridge, and you can have these hours ready in advance. And there it is. You can see how thick and nice the bread is with the toppings on top. It's just the perfect marriage to make one really great bite. Speaking of great bites, I'm going to remove this fancy basil garnish, put it to the side, and now I'm going to take a big old bite, and I'm going to get my hand ready to see if anything falls. And as you can see, nothing fell. The narrow shape of the bread and the size of the toppings makes for the perfect bite. I mean, I had some of this stuff left over later, and I put it on a burger. I threw it in some pasta. I even hit up Jessica Alba, and I was like, hey girl, you want to come over for some bruschetta? And she was like, yeah, sure. Well, that didn't exactly happen, but at least 2 out of those 3 things really happened. And yeah, even the avocado one, it kind of tastes like bruschetta meets avocado toast. It's absolutely delicious. We're bucking tradition here. A little piece fell off. Who cares? Make it your way, make a mess, don't. Cut whatever shape you want, use whatever ingredients you want, pronounce it however you want, but just make it and have yourself a great time. Have some garlicky kisses. Mwah.